The alarm bells screamed through the Vorthak Empire's deep space monitoring station like angry metal birds. Sensor operator Gixtal had been staring at the same boring screen for 6 hours straight when suddenly everything changed. His 4 eyes went wide as dinner plates. "What in the 7 hells is that thing?" he whispered, his voice shaking like a leaf in a storm. The readings on his screen made absolutely no sense. Something was flying toward their space, but it wasn't like anything he'd ever seen before. The energy coming off this mystery ship was completely crazy. It was way too advanced for those primitive species they kept files on, but also way too messy and weird for the big civilizations everyone knew about. Gixtal's claws clicked nervously on his control panel as he double-checked everything. Nope, the readings were real. This ship was breaking every rule in the book. "Admiral Thekfor to the sensor station, now!" Gixtal called out, his voice cracking like a teenager. Admiral Thekfor stomped over on his 6 legs, looking annoyed. He was a veteran of 3 galactic wars and had seen pretty much everything the universe could throw at him. Or so he thought. "What's got you all worked up, operator?" Thekfor growled, his voice like gravel in a blender. "Sir, we've got a ship coming in on approach vector 77 Alpha. But sir, this thing doesn't make sense. Look at these energy readings." Admiral Thekfor leaned over the console, his compound eyes scanning the data. His confident expression slowly melted away like ice cream in the sun. The propulsion system this ship was using should have been impossible. The energy patterns looked like someone had taken a dozen different technologies and somehow smashed them together. "Could be a ghost ship," muttered Chief Science Officer Velkara, who had wandered over to see what all the fuss was about. "Maybe. Some ancient vessel that's been drifting for thousands of years. Or maybe it's a trap," added Communications Officer Zyklon, always the paranoid one. "Some enemy trying to trick us with fake readings." But Junior Officer Pexmar, the youngest member of the crew, had a different idea. "Sir, what if it belongs to those humans we just discovered? The ones our scouts found a few cycles ago?" The entire command center went dead quiet. You could have heard a pin drop in space. Admiral Thekfor turned to look at Pexmar like he'd just suggested the ship was made of cheese. "Human? Are you out of your mind, officer? Our reconnaissance teams reported those creatures barely figured out how to split atoms. They're still using chemical rockets to get off their little mudball planet. But sir, the readings must be wrong, or this ship belongs to someone else entirely." Thekfor cut him off. "There's no way those primitive bipeds could build something like this. They probably don't even know there are other species in the galaxy yet." The mysterious vessel kept getting closer, and the readings kept getting weirder. The ship seemed to be doing things that should have been physically impossible. It was changing direction without slowing down, accelerating in ways that should have turned any crew inside into jelly, and somehow its energy output was staying perfectly stable through all of it. "Sir," Gixtal called out again, his voice now barely above a whisper, "it's not just the propulsion. Look at the hull composition readings." Everyone crowded around the screen. The ship appeared to be built from dozens of different materials. Some they recognized from various species across the galaxy, but others were completely unknown. It looked like someone had taken parts from 20 different civilizations and somehow made them work together. "That's impossible," breathed Chief Engineer Moxtel, who had just arrived. "Those materials shouldn't be compatible. The molecular structures would create fatal resonance cascades." "Yet there it is," Admiral Thekfor said grimly, "flying through space like it owns the place." The tension in the command center was thick, enough to cut with a knife. Here was the mighty Vorthak Empire, rulers of 3 star systems and conquerors of 12 different species, completely stumped by one weird ship. "Sir, should we prepare the fleet?" asked Fleet Coordinator Nexvala. "Admiral." Thekfor stared at the approaching vessel for a long moment. In all his years of service, he'd never encountered anything that made him feel this uncertain. This ship represented something completely outside their understanding of how the galaxy worked. It was either the greatest archaeological discovery in history or the beginning of their worst nightmare. "Yes," he finally said, his voice heavy with the weight of command. "Alert Battle Group 7, we're going to find out exactly what this thing is and who built it. And if it really is some unknown elder race awakening from ancient sleep, we'd better be ready for anything. The mystery ship continued its approach, carrying secrets that would shake the very foundations of everything the Vorthak Empire thought they knew about the universe. The mystery ship was now close enough that the Vorthak sensors could get a really good look at it, and what they saw made absolutely no sense at all. Chief Engineer Vex Mora had been building starships for 40 years, but this thing looked like it had been put together by someone who had never heard of proper engineering. "This is completely insane," Vex Mora muttered, staring at his analysis screens. His 4 arms were working different controls, at the same time trying to make sense of what he was seeing. "Look at this hull structure. It's like someone took spare parts from a junkyard and somehow made them into a working spaceship." The ship's outer shell was a crazy patchwork of different materials. There were sections that looked like they came from old Altarian cruisers, mixed with what appeared to be Zerion battle armor, combined with chunks of something that looked almost crystalline. And somehow, impossibly, it all held together. "Sir, these metal compositions shouldn't work together," reported analysis specialist Kexitara, her voice full of confusion. "The thermal expansion rates are completely different. When this ship heats up or cools down, these materials should be tearing themselves apart. But the ship wasn't falling apart. In fact, it was performing maneuvers that would make a seasoned pilot throw up." As they watched through their long-range cameras, the vessel suddenly spun around in a complete circle, while still flying forward at incredible speed. Then it did something that made every Vorthak engineer's brain hurt. It turned 90 degrees, without slowing down at all. "That's physically impossible," whispered structural engineer Bexvor. "The G-forces from that turn should have crushed everyone inside and ripped the ship in half." Fleet Commander Zalketh had seen enough space battles to know when something was dangerous, and this weird ship was setting off every alarm bell in his head. He stood on the command bridge of his flagship, watching the approaching vessel with growing unease. "How fast is that thing going?" he asked his navigation officer. "Sir, it's traveling at approximately 7 times the speed our fastest interceptors can manage," came the nervous reply. "And, sir, it's still accelerating." The ship suddenly stopped. Not slowed down, not gradually came to a halt, it just stopped, like someone had hit a pause button on the universe. Then, just as suddenly, it shot off in a completely different direction at an angle that should have been impossible. "Commander," called out weapons specialist Texelara, "I'm trying to get a lock on that vessel for defensive purposes, but our targeting computers can't predict its movement patterns. It's like it's ignoring the basic laws of physics." Zalketh's 3 hearts were beating fast. In all his years of military service, he'd never seen anything move like this. The ship wasn't just fast or maneuverable, it was doing things that violated everything he knew about how objects moved through space. "Sir, I'm detecting at least 15 different propulsion systems on that vessel," reported Chief Scanner Operator Wix Mora. "But they're not just different types, they're from completely different species. Some of these energy signatures match Krolorian plasma drives, others look like modified Zenthari quantum engines, and there are at least 3 systems I can't identify at all." The mystery ship performed another impossible maneuver, this time seeming to fold space around itself for just a moment before returning to normal flight. Several Vorthak officers actually stumbled backward from their stations. "That's it, Commander," Zalketh declared, his voice cutting through the shocked silence. "I don't care if this is an ancient ghost ship, an unknown alien race, or some kind of space demon. We need answers, and we need them now. All ships, move to intercept formation." The Vorthak Battle Group 7 consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 2 massive dreadnoughts. They were the pride of the Empire, capable of reducing entire planets to space dust. But as they moved to surround the strange vessel, something very weird happened. The mystery ship didn't run away. It didn't power up weapons. It didn't even seem particularly concerned about being surrounded by one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. Instead, it just waited. "Sir, the vessel has come to a complete stop," reported the sensor operator. "It's just sitting there, like it's waiting for us to make the first move." Through the main viewing screen, they could see the ship more clearly now. It was definitely artificial, but its design was unlike anything in their databases. Parts of it were sleek and advanced, while other sections looked almost primitive. Some areas were covered in what looked like armor plating, while others were mostly transparent, showing complex machinery inside. It's like looking at the history of galactic technology all mixed together, observed Science Officer Dexkala. I can see design elements from at least 20 different civilizations, but they're all modified somehow. Changed in ways that shouldn't work but somehow do. Commander Zalketh made his decision. Open communication channels. If someone's inside that thing, it's time we met face to face. This mystery ends now. The fate of first contact was about to unfold in ways nobody could have predicted. The communication channel crackled to life with static and weird electronic noises that made the Vorthak officers cover their sensitive hearing organs. Then, suddenly, the main view screen flickered and came into focus, showing something that made everyone in the command center freeze like statues. A human face was looking back at them. The creature had 2 eyes instead of 4, skin that was a strange pinkish color, and hair that was dark and messy like he'd just woken up from a nap. But what really caught everyone's attention was his expression. He looked completely calm and relaxed, like being surrounded by an alien battle fleet was just another Tuesday for him. "Hello there," the human said with a friendly smile that showed his weird flat teeth. "This is Captain Lee Minho of the human exploration vessel Resilience. Sorry if we startled you folks. We're peaceful explorers from a little planet called Hearth." Admiral Thekvor's compound eyes bulged out so far they almost popped out of his head. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air, but no sound came out. Finally, he managed to croak, "Human, you said human." "That's right," Captain Lee replied cheerfully. "Though I'm guessing from your reaction that you've heard of us before. Hope our reputation isn't too bad." "But that's impossible," Chief Engineer Vex Mora burst out, practically shouting. "Our scouts reported your species barely achieved nuclear fusion. You're still using primitive chemical rockets. There's no way you could build a vessel with these capabilities." Captain Lee chuckled and turned to someone off-screen. "Hey, Park. Hyun, did you hear that? They think our ship is too advanced for us." A woman's voice called back from somewhere in the background. "Should I be insulted or flattered?" "Definitely flattered," Lee replied, then turned back to the Vorthak fleet. "I'd like you to meet my crew. Park Hyun is our navigator, Kim Nara handles engineering, and Choi Ji-won is our science officer. We've been exploring this part of the galaxy for about 8 months now." "8 months?" Fleet Commander Zalketh stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Our intelligence reports say humans only achieved interstellar flight 3 years ago." "Well, that's technically correct, Captain," Lee admitted. "But you'd be amazed what you can accomplish when you're not afraid to try new things. Kim Nara, why don't you explain to these nice folks how our ship works?" A young woman with short black hair and oil stains on her uniform appeared on screen. She was wiping her hands on a dirty rag and had the kind of satisfied smile that comes from fixing something complicated. "Oh, this old bucket," Kim Nara said, patting something off-screen affectionately. "She's nothing special. Just took some basic human engineering and mixed it with a few things we picked up along the way." "A few things?" Vex Mora's voice went up so high it cracked. "According to our scans, you've got Alterian plasma conduits connected to Xerion Quantum. Matrices! That configuration should create cascade failures that would vaporize your entire ship." Kim Nara laughed like he'd just told a funny joke. "Yeah, we thought the same thing at first. Took us about 3 weeks to figure out how to make it work properly. The trick is routing the plasma flow through a modified human fusion core and adding some creative bypasses we invented." "Creative bypasses?" Chief Science Officer Velkara leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overcoming her shock. "What do you mean by creative bypasses?" "Well," Kim Nara said, clearly enjoying herself, "we noticed that if you reverse the polarity on the quantum flux stabilizers and run the excess energy through some good old-fashioned copper wiring—" "Yeah, actual copper wire, I know it sounds crazy. You can actually increase overall efficiency by about 30%. The silence that followed was so complete, you could have heard a whisper from 3 star systems away. Every Vorthak engineer in the fleet was staring at their screens, like they'd just watched someone juggle black holes. "Copper wire," Vex Mora whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're using primitive metal conductors in a quantum matrix system." "Hey, don't knock copper wire," another voice called out from the human ship. Science Officer Choi Ji-won appeared on screen, a cheerful woman with glasses that had been repaired with what looked like space tape. "It's cheap, reliable, and when you modify it with some basic nanotechnology we borrowed from the Zenthari, It works better than those fancy crystalline conductors everyone else uses." "Borrowed?" Admiral Thekvor finally found his voice again. "You mean you took Zenthari nanotechnology and modified it?" "Well, we asked nicely first," Captain Lee said with that same casual smile. "The Zenthari were very helpful once we showed them how to improve their shield generators, using some Earth mathematics they'd never seen before. Trade and cooperation, you know. Everyone wins." Commander Zalketh felt like his brain was melting. "You improved Zenthari shield technology?" "They've been perfecting those systems for over 1,000 years. "Yeah, they mentioned that," Park Hyun called out from her navigation station. "Apparently, nobody ever thought to apply quantum tunneling principles to energy distribution patterns. Sometimes an outside perspective helps." The revelation hit the Vorthak fleet like a meteor strike. These humans weren't just using advanced technology. They were taking the galaxy's greatest achievements and making them better with ideas that seemed to come from nowhere. The emergency meeting in Emperor Kolvaran's war chamber felt more like a funeral than a strategy session. Intelligence reports were scattered across the massive holographic table like pieces of a broken puzzle, and every single piece showed the same terrifying truth. Humans were everywhere, and they were changing everything. Intelligence Director. Wexthan stood at the center of the room, his usually confident posture now slumped like a deflated balloon. In his 6 hands, he held data tablets that contained information that would have seemed like science fiction just months ago. "Your Supremacy," Wexthan began, his voice shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. "The situation is far worse than we initially believed. These humans have been busy. Very, very busy." Emperor Kolvaran leaned forward in his massive throne, his 12 eyes focused intently on his intelligence chief. "Explain. And don't sugarcoat anything. I want the full truth." "Sir," in the 37 cycles since humans achieved interstellar flight, they have made contact with 43 different species. Not just contact, active trade relationships, technology exchanges, and what they call collaborative innovation projects. Strategic advisor Nix Mora almost choked on her ceremonial drink. 43 species in 37 cycles. That's more than our empire has contacted in the last 2 centuries. "It gets worse," Wexthan continued, his voice getting quieter with each word. "They're not just meeting these species, they're learning from them. Every single encounter results in humans acquiring new technologies. But here's the terrifying part. They don't just copy what they learn, they improve it." The holographic display above the table flickered to life, showing images that made everyone in the room gasp. Human ships that looked like they'd been built by a committee of mad scientists from 20 different worlds. Space stations that defied every principle of proper engineering, but somehow worked better than anything the Vorthak had ever built. "Look at this," Wexthan said, pointing to an image of a human cargo vessel. "This ship uses Krolorian plasma drives for basic propulsion, Altarian energy shields for protection, Xerion quantum computers for navigation, and Zenthari nanotechnology for hull repair. But they've modified every single system." "Modified how?" asked Fleet Admiral Kex Nova, leaning forward with the kind of professional interest that comes from 30 years of military engineering. "They made them all work together," Wexthan replied simply. "Systems that were never designed to be compatible are now functioning as a single unit, and not just functioning, they're performing at levels that exceed the original specifications by significant margins." Military strategist Hexcala stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "That's impossible. You can't just mix technologies from different species. The power requirements alone would create conflicts that would normally destroy—" "The ship, yes," Wexthan interrupted. "But humans seem to have developed something they call adaptive integration protocols. They find ways to make incompatible systems work together by creating buffer technologies that bridge the gaps." Emperor Kolvaran's expression was growing darker by the minute. "What kind of buffer technologies?" "Sir, they use everything. Modified versions of their own primitive technologies combined with advanced alien systems. They take simple materials, like copper and iron, and enhance them with nanotechnology. They use basic mathematics from their homeworld and apply it to quantum mechanics in ways that our best scientists say shouldn't work." The room fell silent, except for the quiet humming of the holographic projectors. Everyone was trying to process what they were hearing, and none of them liked the conclusions they were reaching. Sir, Communications Chief Dexthor spoke up from the back of the room. There's something else. The humans share their innovations freely among themselves. Every improvement, every new discovery, every successful modification gets transmitted to all human colonies and ships immediately. What do you mean by immediately? The Emperor asked, though he already suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Real-time data sharing across their entire civilization, Dexthor replied. When one human engineer figures out how to improve Feltarian shield technology, every human ship gets the upgrade within days. Their rate of technological advancement isn't just fast, it's exponential. Strategic Advisor Niximura was staring at the holographic displays with the expression of someone watching their worst nightmare come to life. Your Supremacy, if these reports are accurate, human technology is advancing faster than we can even track it. Ships we observed last cycle are already obsolete, replaced by newer versions that incorporate technologies from species they've encountered just weeks ago. How many humans are there? Emperor Kolvaran asked quietly. Their population is approaching 9 billion on their homeworld alone, Wexthan replied. But they're expanding rapidly. New colonies, exploration fleets, trading vessels, they're spreading across the galaxy like spilled water. Fleet Admiral Kexanova leaned back in his chair, his face pale. 9 billion minds all working together, all sharing information, all improving on each other's ideas, and they treat our most advanced technologies like starting points for their own innovations. Sir, Intelligence Director Wexthan said, his voice barely above a whisper. There's one more thing. According to our deep cover agents, humans have started something they call the Great Project. They're building something big, something that combines technologies from every species they've encountered. Our agents couldn't get details, but the energy readings from their construction sites are off the charts. Emperor Kolvaran stood up slowly, his massive form casting shadows across the war chamber. For the first time in his 3-century reign, he felt something he'd never experienced before. Genuine fear of another species. Gentlemen and ladies, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. We are no longer dealing with a primitive species that stumbled into space. We are facing something unprecedented, a civilization that doesn't just adapt to the galaxy, but adapts the galaxy to itself. The implications hung in the air like a storm cloud about to break. The distress signal came through at the worst possible time. Admiral Thekvor was in the middle of reviewing battle plans for potential human encounters when his communications officer practically shouted across the bridge. Sir, emergency transmission from Dreadnought Eternal Glory. They're in serious trouble. The main screen flickered to life, showing Captain Vexicorian of the Eternal Glory looking absolutely terrified. Behind him, sparks were flying from damaged control panels and emergency lights were flashing red. Admiral, we're caught in the Crimson Nebula. Our navigation systems failed during the plasma storm, and now we're stuck. Primary power is failing. Life support is critical, and we've got over 3,000 crew members aboard. Thekvor felt his blood turn cold. The Crimson Nebula was one of the most dangerous regions in their territory, a swirling mass of charged particles and electromagnetic chaos that could fry ship systems in minutes. Getting stuck there was basically a death sentence. How long until total system failure? Thekvor asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. 6 hours, maybe 7 if we're lucky, Vexcorian replied, his voice cracking with desperation. Our nearest rescue ships are 2 days away, sir, we're not going to make it. Thekvor was about to respond when his sensor operator called out with surprise in his voice. Sir, there's another ship approaching the nebula. It's that human vessel, the Resilience. On the screen, Captain Vexcorian's expression shifted from despair to confusion. The humans? What are they doing here? Before anyone could answer, a familiar voice came over the communication channel. It was Captain Lee Minho, and he sounded as calm and friendly as ever. Eternal Glory, this is Captain Lee of the Resilience. We picked up your distress signal. We're about 20 minutes out from your position. Hang tight, we're coming to help. Help? Vexcorian sputtered. Captain Lee, with all due respect, your ship is much smaller than ours. If you enter the nebula, She'll be destroyed just like we will be. Don't worry about us, Lee replied with that same casual confidence they'd seen before. We've got some experience with tricky situations. Kim Nara, what's our approach looking like? Engineer Kim Nara's voice came through clearly. Captain, I've been studying their ship design and the nebula conditions. It's going to be tight, but I think we can do it. We'll need to modify our shields to match their frequency and use the quantum tunneling drive to navigate through the charged particle streams. Admiral Thekvor interrupted the conversation. Captain Lee, I appreciate your offer to help, but this is extremely dangerous. The Crimson Nebula has destroyed ships far larger and more advanced than yours. Admiral, with respect, you're thinking about this the wrong way, Captain Lee replied. You're right that we're smaller and less advanced in traditional terms, but sometimes being smaller and more flexible is exactly what you need. What happened next was like watching magic happen in real time. The human ship entered the deadly nebula like it was taking a casual stroll through a park. While the massive Vorthak dreadnought was being torn apart by electromagnetic storms, the little human vessel danced between the energy currents like it belonged there. How are they doing that? Breathed Navigation Officer Kelmora, watching the display in amazement. They're not fighting the nebula, observed Chief Science Officer Velkara with growing wonder. They're working with it. Look at their shield configuration. They're actually using the nebula's energy to power their systems. Captain Lee's voice came through again. Eternal Glory, we're going to dock with your emergency port 7. Kim Nara and Choi Jiwon are coming aboard with repair equipment. Fair warning. Our methods might seem a little unconventional. 20 minutes later, Admiral Thekvor found himself watching something he never thought he'd see. Human engineers were working alongside Vorthak crew members, not just to repair the damaged systems, but to completely redesign them on the spot. Engineer Kim, Captain Vex Corian said, watching in fascination as the human woman rewired a critical power conduit using what looked like spare parts and electrical tape. How did you know this would work? Kim Nara looked up from her work, her face streaked with coolant fluid and her hands covered in grease. Honestly, I didn't know for sure. But your power distribution system was fighting against the nebula's interference instead of adapting to it. So I borrowed some ideas from how Earth plants grow around obstacles and applied the same principles to your energy flow. You used plant biology to fix our quantum power core, Vex Corian asked, his voice full of disbelief. Biology, engineering, mathematics, it's all connected, Science Officer Choi Ji-won added cheerfully as she calibrated a sensor array using what appeared to be a modified human calculator, duct-taped to an alien interface. The universe follows patterns. Once you learn to see the patterns, you can apply solutions from anywhere to anywhere else. Chief Engineer Bexvor, who had been watching the humans work, finally spoke up. This is impossible. You're combining repair techniques from 6 different engineering disciplines using materials that shouldn't be compatible and somehow making it all work better than the original design. That's because you're thinking about engineering like it's a rigid set of rules, Kim Nara replied. Installing what looked like a human smartphone into the ship's computer system, we think about it like problem solving. What do we need to accomplish? What tools do we have? How can we make them work together? 3 days later, not only was the Eternal Glory fully operational, but its systems were running at 150% efficiency. Compared to original specifications, the ship that had been dying in the nebula was now the most advanced vessel in the Vorthak fleet. Admiral Thekvor stood in the repair bay, watching his engineering team examine the human modifications with expressions of pure wonder. Captain Lee, he said finally, I owe you an apology. We thought humans were primitive because your technology looked different from ours. We didn't realize that different doesn't mean inferior. Captain Lee smiled that familiar, friendly smile. Admiral, there's something important you need to understand about humans. We don't see technology as something sacred that can't be changed. We see it as tools to be improved. Every species we meet teaches us something new, and we try to teach them something in return. What can humans possibly teach the galaxy? Thekvor asked genuinely. That the best solutions usually come from combining ideas that nobody thought would work together, Kim Nara answered, wiping her hands on a rag. Every species we've met is incredibly good at perfecting their own technologies, but nobody seems to think about mixing them with ideas from completely different fields. 6 months later, Emperor Kolvarin signed the first Vorthak-Human Alliance treaty. But it wasn't a treaty between a superior and inferior civilization. It was an agreement between equals, one side bringing thousands of years of refined technology, the other bringing the ability to see possibilities that nobody else had imagined. The universe was about to become a much more interesting place.